Welcome back, my erudite friends, to another episode of MonteCristo's Power Rankings, the Thinking Fans Power Rankings. Today we'll be going through the number 10 through number 1 teams after 2 weeks of Overwatch League competition in Stage 1. We'll be doing these videos before every stage, in the middle of every stage, and before every stage playoffs, just so you have an idea of who is on the up and up and who is sliding down in terms of competitiveness. Remember that these are power rankings, so they will not be reflective of the standings, considering there are large differences in terms of who is hot in a certain meta or at a certain time. Strength of schedule, obviously, we have to take into account. A team could lose all their games, but if they played very good opponents, they could still be relatively high on these power rankings. So that said, thank you for joining me, and without further ado, we will be taking a look at number 10, the Shanghai Dragons. They have dropped 2 spots. Obviously, they had a rough first week of competition, losing to the Hangzhou Spark and the Vancouver Titans. However, both of these teams have proven to be very good and in the upper echelons of teams in the competition, and obviously having Guangzhou integrated into the team for only their second match in Week 1, not a lot of time to practice, and by the time they ended up playing Boston, granted it was a Boston uprising without fusions, they looked much better, much more convincing, and much more like the team that we believed they could be heading into this season. That said, their 2 losses combined with a win over a weakened Boston roster means they are going to drop a little bit, but this is a team that could go right back up to 8 and be in competition for the stage playoffs, no doubt about it. Coming in at number 9, we have the Seoul Dynasty, who will be moving up 2 slots. This comes after an impressive debut win in Week 1 against the Gladiators, but they also lost to Dallas. However, they bounced back and looked really dominant again when they played the Chengdu Hunters. I think that they were playing sort of strangely passively against Dallas when we saw them versus the Gladiators and the Hunters. They looked more like a fissure-led team, very aggressive, willing to take risks, and very decisive as well. So I wouldn't worry too much if you're a Seoul fan. This is probably a team that, is still going to be in the around 9 to 11 range. This time they're going to be at number 9. I think they can and will show us a little bit more next week when they end up going against Boston and the real test, which will be the New York Excelsior. That will be a great barometer to see how good Seoul Dynasty is right now. At number 8, we have a big mover coming up 4 slots in the power rankings will be the Guangzhou Charge. And this may confuse people because they set out in their debut by losing to the Chengdu Hunters, but they convincingly swept Dallas and even took the Vancouver Titans in a very tight series to the 5th map. They are 1-2 at the current time, but one thing that is a very good metric for Guangzhou Charge fans is that they were winning about 57% of their team fights heading into the Vancouver match, which put them in 3rd place overall in the league. Team fight win percentage is a very good metric of who is going to be winning matches in Overwatch League, and I think Guangzhou Charge has been a little bit underrated. I'm not entirely positive about this ranking, may have moved them up a little bit too high, and I'm not sure we're going to get a lot of good data until they play the Gladiators in Week 4. So that'll be something to look forward to. Next week, their matches against Florida and the Valiant, we expect them to win both of those, and it probably won't tell us a whole hell of a lot. Coming in at number 7 will be the Hangzhou Spark, dropping 5 slots from number 2 in our previous power ranking. They came out of the gates looking strong, wins over Shanghai, although they didn't have a main tank at that time because Guangzhou was not playing in the roster, and another win, a close one, over the Valiant. However, losing to the Houston Outlaws and the London Spitfire in their second week of play. The loss to Houston, they played very badly, and the loss to London, I thought they played okay, but London was just going gangbusters, going all out. So they've stabilized at 2-2. I think Hangzhou has enough talent, though, to bounce back from this 0-2 week and really prepare for the San Francisco Shock next week, which is a match they might also lose, of course, given San Francisco's current level of strength. That said, Hangzhou, I think, is going to end up being one of the stronger teams in this league, but when you lose to the Houston Outlaws, you're going to be dropping a few slots. At number 6, moving down one rank from the initial power rankings, are the Los Angeles Gladiators. They lost a close match to Paris in week 2, although they did almost manage to win that match by playing the Reinhardt Goats Mirror up against the Eternal. However, a loss to Seoul, where they looked sort of out of whack, was concerning. But then again, they came back and beat the Gladiators in a very close series. It's hard to get a read on them right now when they're capable of, or beating the Shock rather, when they're capable of beating the Shock, but also dropping maps to the Dynasty. It's a bit interesting. However, their strength of schedule has obviously been really, really hard, playing Seoul and then Shock, and then coming up with that loss to the Paris Eternal immediately thereafter. So I still think they're going to be an elite team, just had a very tough schedule to compete with. At number 5, descending 2 slots, is the London Spitfire. And a lot of people will be wondering about this one, considering they really struggled in their first week, losing the rematch to Philadelphia and losing to the Paris Eternal. That said, they did actually beat the Justice. It was ugly. It was horrible. They had to reverse sweep to do it, but they did manage that win. But the really convincing thing, and why they haven't dropped further, is that they played incredibly clean combos and clean goats against the Hangzhou Spark and dominated that series. I think that by putting Birdring on the bench, putting Guard in, and switching Prophet over to Zarya, they've figured out a system that will work for them in the goats meta. So I'm not dropping them too far, and in fact, there's a chance that they go up even higher with a match next week against the Gladiators that is certainly going to be winnable for them if they can continue the Hangzhou Spark form. That said, they are still on the precipice. If they lose to the Gladiators, if they regress back into that week 1 form, they're going to be dropping a hell of a lot further, and we'll consider that win over the Hangzhou Spark a one-off. At number 4, we have the Paris Eternal moving up 3 spots. Looking like masters of the GOATS meta, there are still questions about how well they can play in non-GOAT situations, but their Reinhardt GOATS was good enough to take out the Gladiators this week. We still have a very small sample size with this team. They are 2-0 off of 2 matches, but they've had some easier weeks where they can only focus on one opponent. They'll have another, I guess, easy week this next one because they are just playing the Atlanta Reign. That is a match we probably expect them to win pretty convincingly, you'd have to imagine. And then their next test will be the week 4 match where they play both the Vancouver Titans and the San Francisco Shock in the same week. That is going to be difficult, and that is going to tell us a hell of a lot about the Eternal. Dropping 2 spots to the number 3 position will be the San Francisco Shock. Obviously, they have had a tough time of it, a tough schedule. They did lose to the Gladiators, and they did lose an extremely close series, I think the best series that's been played so far in the Overwatch League, to the Vancouver Titans. So you may be saying, how can a 1-2 team be at number 3? Well, they still looked amazing when they played against the Dallas Fuel, and they looked really good against the Vancouver Titans, too, in a series that really could have gone either way. We could be talking about the Shock right now had they beaten the Titans as potentially the number 1 team in this league, and continuing that spot I had them before the season began. However, loss to the Titans is going to knock them down a couple of slots. I expect them to be able to bounce right back against the Hangzhou Spark, and they have a gimme match against the Washington Justice next week. So this is a team that really needs to win most of the rest of their matches if they want to head to the Stage 1 playoffs, and I think they're more than capable of doing that. At number 2, we have the New York Excelsior, 4-0, but they've had a soft schedule, which is why we can't quite justify putting them at number 1, and they might not even be the number 2 team, just because they've had so many sort of easy matches so far. They came out against Boston, who had just had fusions added a couple of days before. They played the Washington Justice, and then they followed it up with a weakened Valiant and a Houston match where they absolutely destroyed Houston in week number 2. I think they're looking good at GOATS. I don't think they're going to be the best GOATS team in this meta. I think they will probably be more successful in future non-GOATS metas, but they are as clean, as well executed, as polished as we've ever seen the New York Excelsior, of course. They were known for that ability to just deliver that consistency last season, and they're looking like they can do it once again. Not too many difficult matches coming up for them until week 4, where they play the San Francisco Shock. Should be a great match there, and we'll see what the XL are made of when they have to play San Francisco, another top and elite team. Finally, at number 1, it is, of course, the Vancouver Titans, who have now improved their schedule to 3-0. They did look a bit shaky against the Guangzhou Charge, but again, that Charge roster I think is better than most people will expect. And then they won that thrilling match against the San Francisco Shock. So we have a pretty good read on these guys at this point in time. They played a couple of other teams that I would put in the top 8 pretty convincingly, and won. Right now, they've shown that they're very adaptive to other teams' strategies, really punishing Sinatra's high ground positioning, which you can see in an analysis video on this channel, and using their ultimates intelligently and creatively, and in ways that no other GOATS team really does. They get more value for their ability than any other team right now, and until some other team can show some level of weakness, perhaps that is going to be their Sombra GOATS play, considering that Sominsu didn't look great on the Sombra when we've seen him use it. That's a possibility. But in standard GOATS, somebody's going to have to do something different in order to break them down, because they are looking like the top team in Overwatch right now. Thank you very much for joining me for another episode of these Power Rankings. I hope you guys have enjoyed them. And like I said, we will be continuing to do these every few weeks to give an update throughout the Overwatch League season.